This is from Joon-ho in Seoul. I think this is the kind of story people don't imagine could happen to them until it does. I'm still trying to understand how one moment at a clinic ended up changing everything I thought I knew about my life. It started during a routine medical exam for work. I remember sitting under those bright hospital lights, half asleep, thinking it would just be another boring checkup. But the nurse's expression shifted when she looked at my results, like something didn't add up. She gently asked me if I was sure about my parents' blood types. At first, I laughed it off because who questions something like that? But the way she kept glancing between me and the paper made my chest tighten with an anxiety I couldn't explain. When the clinic called me back for a second test, I told myself they probably mixed up samples. It felt easier to blame a simple mistake than to consider the alternative, that something about my identity might be fundamentally wrong. The second test matched the first one. The doctor said my results were biologically inconsistent with the information I provided. Hearing that phrase felt unreal. I remember nodding like I understood, but inside I felt like the ground had tilted sideways. I didn't tell my parents right away. Instead, I walked home slowly, replaying little memories from childhood, faces, birthdays, family trips, trying to find anything that might explain the growing sense that something had always been slightly off, even if I never admitted it. A few days later, the clinic asked me to bring any medical records or documents from my parents, as if they needed proof that my family was real. Their tone wasn't angry or suspicious. It was concerned, and somehow that made it even scarier. That night at home, I kept watching my mother cook dinner like she had done 1,000 times. The normalcy felt strange. I found myself staring at her face, wondering why I never noticed how little I resembled her, like the truth had always been hidden in plain sight. I finally asked her if she remembered my early medical tests as a baby. The question wasn't even fully out before her expression froze. It was as if some locked, forgotten part of her cracked open all at once, and she couldn't hide it anymore. She led me to sit down at the kitchen table, her hands trembling so much she had to hold them together. When she whispered, "There's something I never told you," I felt my stomach drop. I didn't know it then, but everything in my life was about to be rewritten. My mother kept her eyes on the table as she spoke. She said she never wanted to hurt me, that she thought love alone could be enough. Her voice cracked when she admitted she had been terrified of this day ever coming, even after more than 30 years. When she finally said the words, "You're not my biological son," I felt something inside me collapse. It wasn't anger at first. It was disbelief wrapped in a cold, confused kind of grief. I didn't know how to react, because she was still my mother, yet suddenly a stranger. South Korea has sent more than 200,000 children overseas for adoption since the 1950s, making it one of the world's largest sending countries. Most were adopted to the United States, followed by Denmark, France, Sweden, and other parts of Europe. Did you know? Many children labeled as orphans actually had living parents. Harsh stigma toward unwed mothers and institutional pressure often led to hidden or altered records, which is why so many Korean adoptees only discover the truth decades later. Anyway, her confession didn't come out cleanly. It came in broken pieces. How she'd wanted a child desperately, how someone told her I needed a home, how paperwork wasn't always official back then. She kept saying she thought loving me would erase the past, but the past never really disappears. I asked her why she never told my father. She stared at the floor like she was bracing for judgment. She said she feared he wouldn't accept me, or that he'd resent her for deceiving him. Hearing that made my heart twist. Love built on fear feels fragile in a way I hadn't understood before. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, numb, as the weight of her words pressed down on me. Part of me wanted to comfort her, because she looked so small and scared. But another part of me felt betrayed, like my entire identity had been built on someone else's desperate hope. When I finally went to my room, I stared at old family photos, noticing details I had ignored for years. Tiny differences in eye shape, skin tone, even the way I stood compared to my parents. It felt like I was analyzing evidence of my own life rather than remembering it. At night, I tried to sleep, but my thoughts kept looping. If I wasn't their biological child, who was I? Where did I come from? Was someone out there looking for me? Or had they moved on, like I never existed? Those questions felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried before. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of dread and determination. I needed answers, even if they hurt. I decided to request my birth records from the district office, hoping for clarity. Instead, I found myself stepping into a maze of vague dates, missing signatures, and documents that raised more questions than they answered. The clerk at the office looked confused as she flipped through my file. She kept frowning at dates that didn't line up. When she finally closed it, she said quietly that some older records in Korea weren't always handled carefully. Her tone made it clear that was an understatement. Walking out of the building, I felt this strange combination of sadness and anger. It wasn't just that my records were incomplete. It was that someone, somewhere, had decided the truth of my life didn't matter enough to preserve. That thought hit harder than I expected. For the first time in my life, I imagined what it might have been like the day I was born, who held me, who let me go, and who made the decision that separated me from everything I should have known. It was a painful kind of imagining because I had nothing real to attach it to. I thought about telling my father everything. I even pictured the conversation, his face falling, the silence, the questions he wouldn't know how to ask. But every scenario ended the same way, with our family feeling permanently fractured. I wasn't sure if I had the right to cause that. One night, I sat alone in my apartment with the lights off, trying to understand my own emotions. I wasn't angry at my mother for wanting me. I was angry at a world that made her believe secrecy was the only way to protect me. That realization didn't make things easier. It just made them heavier. I started to wonder whether I should search for my biological parents. But the idea scared me. What if they never wanted to meet me? Or what if they had been searching for decades? Both possibilities felt heartbreaking in different ways, and I didn't know which one I feared more. Some days, I felt completely detached from myself, like I was walking around in a body with no history. Other days, I felt overwhelmingly grateful to the people who raised me. It was confusing to hold grief and love at the same time, but that became my new reality. I eventually went back to talk to my mother again. She held my hand with this fragile grip, like she worried I might slip away. She told me she never regretted taking me in, not even for a second. I believed her, but believing her didn't fix the questions that kept me up at night. In the days that followed, life didn't return to normal. Work felt blurry. Friends seemed distant. Everything in my life felt slightly misaligned, like the world had shifted a few degrees and I hadn't found my balance yet. I kept wondering how many people lived with hidden stories like mine. I tried to move through my days the way I always had, but everything felt heavier. I kept questioning who I would have been if the truth had come out earlier, and whether knowing it now was supposed to change the way I look at the people who raised me. It felt like I was rewriting myself from the inside out. I'm still learning how to hold all of this at once. The gratitude, the confusion, the loss, and the strange sense of freedom that comes from finally knowing the truth. Some days I feel strong enough to face it head on. Other days, I just breathe and hope the answers will feel less overwhelming with time. Thank you for listening to my story. If any part of this made you think about your own journey or someone you care about, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might help someone who feels alone right now. And if you'd like to hear more real stories, please consider subscribing.